Hello, my name is Alan. Today I'm a recovering alcoholic. I'm here to read the Daily Reflections book and possibly comment on it today for February 11th, 2026. It's called The Limits of Self-Reliance. We asked ourselves why we had them. Fears. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? That's from Alcoholics Anonymous, page 68. All of my character defects separate me from God's will. When I ignore my association with Him, I face the world and my alcoholism alone and must depend on self-reliance. I have never found security and happiness through self-will, and the only result is a life of fear and discontent. God provides the path back to Him and to His gift of serenity and comfort. First, however, I must be willing to acknowledge my fears and understand their source and power over me. I frequently ask God to help me understand how I separate myself from Him. Period. The end of the reading. So where they came up with this I guess a quote about the limits of self-reliance came out of this book here, the Alcoholics Anonymous book, found on page 68, and I'm going to look at that and possibly read a bit of it because I was having a tough time with this today. And where they pulled that quote from is near the top of page 68. And I found it earlier to come back here. To page 67. And this is all in the chapter How It Works in the big book. Which we're going to skip all this preamble stuff or the explanation, whatever. Here, page 67 is where I'm going to start talking a little bit about fear today, because apparently that's a big deal in today's reading. And it's February, so that's the second month, and we're talking about second step things. Let me get to this too, so to maybe make more of a restraint that I might stay within today. The 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Step 2 says, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Period. The end of the second step. Now, on page 68 in the big book, here it starts talking about fear, and this is to go alongside today's reading. The quote that says, we asked ourselves why we had them. Fears is what he's talking about, or her. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? So here's maybe an explanation or somewhere to look for the Notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and the wife. This is apparently talking about we're in the, I don't know what that's talking about, I guess. I thought it was talking about a rough draft thing for your 4-step moral inventory, and we're only at whatever. So you just skip all that. But notice the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer. Actually, that's in the description prior to this, and there's just a whole bunch of stuff we're not going to get into right this minute. So the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and the wife. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did we not ourselves set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. This is where they pulled this quote from. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper even though we had no resentment in connection with them. We asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great confidence, great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. Perhaps there is a better way. We think so. For we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We are in the world to play the role He assigns. Just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us and humbly rely on Him, does He enable us to match calamity with serenity. And I got all tangled up in a bunch of this. Number one, if you've got a problem with the word God, just don't even pay attention to that word in this context, or better yet, substitute that word God with the AA group that you might be attending, or some mentor you might have in life, or maybe your sponsor in AA, or some kind of counselor, maybe if you've got a psychotherapist in your life, some person that you value their wisdom, apparently. Perhaps there's a better way. We think so. For we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon our sponsor. We trust infinite sponsorship rather than our finite selves. We are in the world to play the role He assigns. Just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us and humbly rely on Him, does He enable us to match calamity with serenity. So I had to turn this part around backwards and go, if I want calamity to be matched with the same amount or some amount of serenity each time it happens, I'm going to get that from, say, the AA program of recovery. I'm not going to get it from self-reliance, because we just found out that wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us had, okay, and so perhaps there's a better way. We think so. We're on a different basis now. We've selected this power greater than ourselves, or the drunken monkey on our back screaming for another drink, even though that would be the craziest thing we could do. And self-reliance wasn't getting us anywhere. And when it made us cocky, or self-confidence made us cocky, that was even worse. So we cry out to God, a lot of us do. Maybe you don't have that theology in your head, and you decide to go the route that a lot of people go. Step 2, came to believe a power greater than ourselves. You just think of that as saying, step 2, came to believe that these group of people in Alcoholics Anonymous could restore my sanity. And then, I gave you a demonstration of, or the quotation from whichever book it was, I forget again now, just yesterday, about, well, these people have seemed to have solved their alcohol problem. And like in my case, I knew that because I listened to what they were saying. It was making sense to me. They had a very similar, if not almost exact story as mine, which was eerie. And they had a better grip on being sober than I had, at least at the time. then, and maybe still today. I'm just saying, at the time, I had no grip on being sober and was ready to relapse again at any point almost. Maybe not that drastic, but anyways, I decided, you know what, I don't have any kind of connection with God as far as I can tell. And I was in a different place at that time in my life. That was 20 years ago. That's changed quite a bit now, but at the time, it's like, you know what? And this is a kind of long story too. It took me like 2 years to arrive at this point, to be suitably humble, maybe. The willingness to go to any length for sobriety, I guess. Or at least to go to that length required to ask somebody to be my sponsor. That was a huge, huge hurdle for me. I was not a very humble person. I still miss it all the time. So anyways, yeah, perhaps there's a better way we think so, for we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God, or maybe your sponsor, or maybe you're, I don't know, you got a preacher, a pastor in your life, maybe you got a decent family, a good father, grandfather, mother, grandmother, brother, sister. Maybe you have a psychotherapist in your life, somebody, a life coach. Maybe you've got some long dead philosopher that you really like the way they went through life, and you read all their work. But in this case, they're using God as this figurehead of, I don't know, authority and wisdom, maybe. For we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. And again, this is instead of the self-reliance or relying upon ourselves, because we are finite people with only so much experience. That's why if you're sitting in a group of other people in Alcoholics Anonymous and they seem to be making their way through life better than you are, or if the way they seem to be handling issues and problems and difficulties and even celebratory things and those kind of things in their life, the great positive things, and you're interested in living like they do or adopting some of their stuff into your life, I'm missing the point. We trust God, relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We are in the world to play the role He assigns. So it's like if your sponsor tells you to go read page 67 and 68 in the big book, and you like the way your sponsor's getting through life, maybe you should really consider doing what that sponsor is asking you to do or telling you to do. And go read what he tells you to read, or what, do what they're telling you to do. And that's the other thing too. It's like I was so far away from sobriety, except for the actual, I had put the drink down, but I was miserable and a wreck inside my head mentally in lots of different ways. So I figured these people seem to, I like what these people have. I want some for myself. How do I do it? Here, you got 2 ears, 1 mouth. That's because, as some people say, here's one of these people that Marcus Aurelius, old, Roman philosopher guy, way back, thousands of years ago, a stoic type of personality, I guess. Now I forget why I brought him up. That's a common occurrence. Anyways, I'm chasing this other different bunny right here. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We are in the world to play the role He assigns. Just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us do, and humbly rely upon Him, does He enable us to match calamity with serenity. we're going to be matched with serenity for in place of calamity to the extent that we do as we think they would have us do. So for me, in the Alcoholics Anonymous thing, looking for a power greater than myself, seeing these people apparently having results I wanted, Marcus Aurelius, 2 ears, 1 mouth. That's because we should be listening twice as much as we are speaking. So I had to shut up and stop struggling, fighting, and disagreeing with people in the AA meetings and their philosophy of life or whatever, and the AA program as a whole, and listen, and then listen again, and then let it soak in before I started talking again. 1 mouth, 2 ears. Listen twice as much as you're talking. It's kind of a nice rule of thumb to, if you can have the presence of mind to remember that when anger wants to hijack your life again. So, it's amazing how much I've changed in 20 years for the better. 20 years of being sober and listening to my sponsor, listening to the other people in AA, reading these books, doing these videos. I haven't been doing these very long, but it's a great way, at least for me, to help myself through the day, is to do one of these videos. And I didn't want to do this one today because I felt tired, maybe. I don't know. I just wanted to do other things, and I didn't feel inspired. That's a tricky thing. Inspiration. And I could talk about that, but I'm not going to. Okay, so I just did this anyways. And now I'm feeling all excited. Where am I trying to get to? This fear thing. It seems our lives are shot through with it, and a life of self-reliance only on yourself is going to be limited to what your power and experience and strength and intelligence and resources are. Why not double up your resources and get a sponsor? And then when the tough waves come, you might be able to handle them better because you'll have twice the resources available. Now, if you're of the mind of believing in God as the creator of the universe, which is a pretty large, complex, fairly well operating place, if you had those resources to draw upon, wouldn't that be great? Look how big the universe is and the energy involved and all kinds of stuff. If you could just get a tiniest sliver of that to work in your direction for you instead of against you, a lot of people think that's happening, that God is punishing us. I'm not here to talk about that. It's a big issue in my life, though, because I used to think I was being punished by some outside force, which could be true. What I was missing, though, is that I probably wouldn't be caught and punished as frequently for the wrongdoings that I was doing to other people, say, to keep this in context a little bit, had I been following like what it said here in the big book. Calamity, serenity, if you want to get that ratio of calamity and serenity equal, for the same amount of calamity, chaos, pain, suffering, misery in your life, compensated equally with serenity, calm, peace, justice, maybe happiness, contentment, fulfillment, on the other side of the scale. How does that work out? Page, where is it? Page 67, 68. That's page 74. That's not it. Here's that chart I mentioned earlier. Or I didn't mention the chart. I mentioned Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, my employer, my wife. Our grudge list, apparently. That's our 4-step inventory. Perhaps there's a better way. We think so. For we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God or a sponsor or a pastor or a psychotherapist or a life coach. If you're not into that God word, we trust infinite God. This is why I brought up that God, if he's the creator of the universe or whoever you think created the universe, if you look around at the universe, it's a big place. It's full of a lot of stuff that seems to operate quite well. Vast resources is what I'm getting at. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. About this wave that I said, like when you're facing some wave of calamity or chaos or struggle or misery in your life, and you really think it's just going to crush you, wash you away, kill you, wipe you out entirely, why not double up on your resources and have something either surrounding or with you or next to, or something that can help you weather the storm, as it were, to not be crushed by the singular wave. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. That's the thing, the finite self. We are in the world to play the role he assigns, just like listening to your sponsor, counselor, pastor, preacher, life coach, doctor, psychologist, psychiatrist. They tell you things to do. They suspect something. Here's the cause, maybe. Do this, try this, and then come back and we'll see if that helped. We are in the world to play the role he assigns, just to the extent that we do as we think he would have us, or just as we think we should be doing according to the doctor's orders. We're met with equal serenity or good for the bad. So it all works out. It's equal. There's no more worse than there is better. It's all the same. So you won't be crushed. Every day is a clean slate. The level playing field. We are in the world to play the role he assigns, just to the extent that we do as we think he would have us, and humbly rely on him does he enable us to match calamity with serenity. So we become enabled through an outside source of strength or with backup. I was in the military. I understand backup. It's not good to be out there by yourself. What's it say? That's the self-reliance here. Hadn't self-reliance failed us, self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us had some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. Perhaps there's this better way. And then if we skip through this next paragraph, they trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let him demonstrate through us what he can do. That's like enabling us to face and conquer our fears and match calamity with serenity. We ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be, this role that he would have us play. At once we commence to outgrow fear. Where are we at? I think that's 24 minutes. Let me get back to this book. The limits of self-reliance. Are you any clearer on this? Did you have a question? Maybe put it in the comments, and then I can try and more accurately answer it. We asked ourselves why we had them, the fears. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? That makes sense. I'm by myself. There's a big scary monster heading down the hallway right at me. I got no backup. There's nobody here. I'm afraid of being killed. All my character defects separate me from God's will. When I ignore my association with Him, I face the world and my alcoholism alone and must depend on self-reliance. I have never found security and happiness through self-will, and the only result is a life of fear and discontent. God provides the path back to Him and to His gift of serenity and comfort. First, however, I must be willing to acknowledge my fears and understand their source and power over me. I frequently ask God to help me understand how I separate myself from Him. Period. The end of the reading. So right there, a lot of times when I'm not clear on a reading, say, because it's in print and I can look at it and it's right here. And this is in the English language, and we read from left to right, top to bottom, left to right, top to bottom. I need to sometimes take the sentences, you might call it diagramming the sentence, and take the sentence apart and find out what they're talking about, what the deal is and all this. And so, like I did earlier today in this book about the matching calamity with serenity, I had to take that one apart and go through it backwards. So if this says the limits of self-reliance, and then the last sentence here, I frequently ask God to help me understand how I separate myself from Him. So this person writing this, I think, is not that far separated from God, because I used to not have any of this, because I wouldn't even bother asking anybody or anything, any entity, how I've been separated from them. Because like, you need to be in contact or with something else to realize you've been separated from it, I think, right? Because I think I'm whole right here. If I was to cut off a fingernail or something, not very harmful like that, I wouldn't have known it until it was gone and missing and out of my life, I think. So then this person has a good connection here. So if you're looking for a better connection to God, get to talking to God, even if you don't think He exists or it exists or whatever. So I'm going to stop with that here. First, however, I must be willing to, my cats are freaking out again, willing to acknowledge my fears and understand their source and power over me. So I heard an acronym about fear once, that FEAR stands for false expectations appearing real. That's like this big scary monster running down the hall at me and I become afraid. It's like, that's a manifestation. It's fake. It's make-believe. It's false. That there is no scary monster running down the hall at me. But I look down the hall. It's dark, foreboding, creepy. It's cloaked in shadows. Being outside is even worse sometimes, because then there's a lot more movement and trees and things moving in the dark and shadows and little critters doing stuff. And your imagination will take your fear and cause you, in a way, to see the big scary monster. Here, I'm going to show you something here quickly. But I just realized it could possibly be a copyright thing. So I've got this book called Masters of Deception. And here's just a quick picture of something. That was a picture of something made out of different objects or the same object. And your mind will take the light data coming in and make sense out of it on its own. And so now just imagine if you're drunk, if you're high on meth, if you're tripping on acid, if you're freaking out on cocaine, or if you just had too much caffeine, or if you haven't had any drugs, you've got a lot of different things you're going to draw upon, or I should say your, I don't know, visual cortex is going to function differently. Just chemically it has to, because you got different chemicals going through your brain all the time. So anyhow, this picture I showed was a bunch of geometric shapes that makes a strong suggested illusion that it's a face. Likewise, the scary monster thing. Shadows turning into this monster that's going to get you, and you soil yourself because you're so frightened, and it isn't even real. Okay, the kind of long-winded explanation of the acronym false expectations appearing real. Our mind is full of a bunch of information. We get some input and this fear. So that today's reading. And don't forget that somewhere in here is the second step. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So all of my defects separate me from God's will. That's the first line in the text today from this author, this writer, that I said probably has a pretty good connection here with God, because he's at the very end. I frequently ask God. He's frequently in contact with his power greater than, or her power greater than, or maybe that isn't the power greater than. It's just that this writer of today's text is in frequent contact with God. He or it or they choose as the word, the thing, the power that they're in contact with, or the partner, or his backup, or whatever. God provides the path back to him and to his gift of serenity and comfort. So, like I said, diagramming the sentence, diagram the whole page here and take it apart and put it back together and do this kind of thing. If I'm looking for serenity and comfort, which I am, because I'm human, and those two things really strongly appeal to me, serenity and comfort. First, though, before I can do that, I must be willing. So I need to accept something that maybe I'm not accepting. Maybe I don't have all the facts. I need to be willing to acknowledge my fears and understand their source and power over me. The source and power over me. That's why it struck me to use this book. The different artists, visual artists, painters and such in history, recent modern kind of history, well, maybe not even, anyways, several great artists Escher, Dali, those are just two, were big into optical illusions. They would paint something and you would look at it and it wouldn't be like you thought it was at face value. Like I gave, it's like, oh, that's just a picture of a bunch of swirly lines, man. And then you look at it again, maybe in a different headspace, I guess, and now it has a different meaning to you. Source and power of your fear. God provides the path back to him and his gift of serenity and comfort, which I like because I'm human. First, however, I need to do something. I need to be willing to acknowledge that, like, I even have some kind of fear, and get all this fake macho crap out of the way and go, you know what, I'm frightened of this. and understand their source and power over me. So that source and power they hold over you, that fear, you have the key to the freedom of that, because of, like, these illusions and the acronym false expectations appearing real. Depending what we're thinking about in one way, let me start here, I guess, with this. We see some stimulus, some shadow, and we think that's a killer. It's going to kill me. It's coming after me. Or we think, oh, that's that food source I was looking for. There's my salvation right behind that bush. Something like that. And I could talk about evolutionary things too about this. I'm not going to, I don't think. Except for other, if evolutionary things are, I don't know, maybe the way I understand them, which doesn't mean anything really. A long time the human has been evolving to better survive in the environment. However, if you look at technology, it has just overturned everything on this planet almost, that evolutionarily we haven't caught up with the technology. So we still have carryover responses from tens of years, hundreds, generational, thousands and thousands of years, tens of thousands of years of us as humans trying to better adapt to our environment, which in the past 200 years, say 300 years, has changed radically. Okay, so yet our systems are still trying to cope with this world that no longer exists. So it isn't especially useful any longer. It can be troublesome, like fear, like shadows and things and whatever. At least for today's example that I'm trying to cobble together, because I think it's interesting here that it says, well, and by diagramming this thing, if I'm looking for serenity and comfort, it says, first, however, I need to do some stuff. I need to acknowledge that I'm human and susceptible to fear. I'm going to put it that way. And now I need to understand where that's coming from and the power that has over me. So fear is going to set up like these evolutionary responses to panic and, what they've termed a long time ago, and I dislike this, I don't like it, the fight or flight response. You're either going to lock up and stand there and fight to the death, or just stand there frozen, unable, paralyzed with fear, or you're going to flee. You're going to have flight. You're going to run, hopefully faster than the predator, and escape with your life yet again and live to fight another day, whatever, this kind of thing. The fight or flight thing. So your eyes capture, or your ears, or some way you sense there's some danger somewhere, or what you maybe even falsely interpret as danger. It may not be dangerous, but this, okay, so anyways. First, however, I must be willing to acknowledge my fears and acknowledge their source and power over me. Now, if I'm looking for comfort and serenity, it says, I need to understand the source and the power of fear over me. Where's this fear coming from? And if you remember when I was reading the big book today, and it mentioned in brackets, it said something about these words were in brackets, wherever that came from. And that came from this chart of moral inventory. Oh my God. I need like an outline to do these things, but I'm not going to do that. It's just, that's too evolved, and I want you to know what I'm thinking for today. So here, I've been yakking about this 40 minutes now, and I don't know how long this thing will record. This is an interesting experiment. So I'm going to try and wrap this up. The limits of self-reliance. If you want comfort and serenity, find a power greater than yourself. Make it the group of AA people around you. Try with that first, maybe. And then if the acknowledge that you might still be fearful of a lot of things, some things, one thing, maybe anything, and understand that source and power over you. If you live, what did it say? If I'm facing my alcoholism alone, I must depend on self-reliance, never found security and happiness through self-will, and the only result is fear and discontent. If you don't want fear and discontent, because you're only relying upon yourself, get a sponsor. I'll say that. Okay, so thanks for coming by here today. I'll get back with you later. Goodbye.